Leonor's crown versus her happiness. The hallways of the palace stretch like rivers of stone. Candles flicker against tapestries that have witnessed centuries of expectation. Outside, Madrid sleeps, indifferent to the quiet deliberations within. For Princess Leonor, the crown is continuity, not choice. Every movement, every gesture, is measured against the enduring framework of the monarchy. Private desire, even fleeting, carries consequences that ripple far beyond a single room. Tradition does not merely observe, it constrains, guides, defines. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence. A smile, a hesitation, a glance, each becomes part of a living ledger, interpreted by historians, diplomats, and citizens alike. The monarchy survives not through affection alone, but through the meticulous choreography of expectation. 2 minutes in, the first tension arises. Not scandal, not overt conflict, but a subtle misalignment between what is personally wanted and what is institutionally required. The question is not whether happiness is possible, but whether it can exist without compromising the perception of inevitability that sustains the crown. What looks like freedom is often performance, what feels like choice is sometimes constraint. By 5 minutes, the words surface again, deliberate and loaded. This time, the phrase is heavier. It frames a moment where personal inclination meets structural necessity. Advisors do not speak of feelings, they speak of precedence, optics, and stability. A misstep is not just personal, it is constitutional in resonance. National identity is woven into these rituals, and any deviation invites interpretation across borders. Abroad, the scrutiny is discreet but exacting. In Washington, every gesture is examined for signs of institutional continuity, a measure of Spain's reliability as a diplomatic partner. In London, the heir's comportment is read as a reflection of generational adaptation within monarchy itself. Canada and Australia observe the symbolic balance, gauging whether tradition can coexist with evolving societal norms. In Berlin, focus rests on process and predictability, procedure is reassurance. By 8 minutes, a deeper mystery emerges. Not concealed, but deliberately unspoken. The inner deliberations of an heir are private, yet the world infers meaning from absence, tone, and timing. Silence, carefully maintained, becomes a tool. Strategic, intentional, unyielding. The institution thrives in ambiguity, provided it retains the power to interpret itself first. 10 minutes in, tension consolidates into subtle strain. Structural, not emotional. Advisors monitor potential flashpoints, charting sequences where personal desire could intersect with institutional expectation. The crown, though inert in its physicality, is active in principle. It must be defended from improvisation because precedent is stronger than law. Once a boundary is perceived to shift, control over future interpretation diminishes. By 14 minutes, the point of no return edges into view. A single action, once visible, cannot be unseen. Every choice by the heir establishes a pattern. Precedent is codified not in statutes but in perception. The crown can endure flexibility, but it cannot endure the illusion of spontaneity. Continuity is tested not in defiance, but in interpretation. 19 minutes in, foreshadowing becomes tangible. The monarchy is stable, yet globally contextualized. Allies measure assurance in composure. Western democracies, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, register signals of alignment or deviation. Germany evaluates whether protocol and procedure retain supremacy over impulse. The system is alive, responsive, and sensitive to subtle inflections of potential strain. In the final minute, the words return, deliberate, unavoidable. Not a question of morality. Not a story concluded. A measure of tension unresolved, poised at the edge of history. What follows will unfold quietly, interpreted broadly, remembered carefully. The crown and personal desire exist in parallel, their intersection uncertain. Every observer waits. Every precedent holds. The story continues. The palace corridors echo with preparation more than footsteps. Each room holds the weight of centuries, and each decision made within carries the imprint of generations. For Princess Leonor, training has never been optional. From constitutional briefings to ceremonial rehearsals, she is shaped not to improvise history, but to inherit it. Every gesture, every glance, is observed not just for etiquette, but for its resonance with continuity. Continuity is the crown's quiet demand. It is embodied in visible presence, in disciplined restraint, in choices that signal stability before they signal personal intent. Private happiness is not forbidden, but it is contained, measured against a ledger far larger than any individual wish. The institution survives because it translates personal desire into predictable form. 2 minutes in, a tension becomes apparent. The question is not whether she may wish for personal joy. The question is whether that wish can coexist with expectation without creating ripples in perception. What appears personal is filtered through protocol. What appears spontaneous is often choreography. The monarchy does not depend on emotion, it depends on the appearance of inevitability. Abroad, the world watches quietly. In Washington, every ceremonial step is assessed as a sign of continuity and reliability. In London, seasoned observers understand that modern heirs carry generational pressures unseen in text. Ottawa and Canberra evaluate symbolism and stability, noting whether tradition bends gracefully. In Berlin, attention is fixed on procedure, on whether form continues to govern outcome. By 5 minutes, the stakes deepen. The phrase returns, "Wait here now." Here, the tension is structural. Advisors weigh not desire, but signal. Every decision is mapped against precedent, every possibility considered for institutional impact. The living thread of continuity is tested when personal inclination intersects with public expectation, and the world perceives the negotiation. Strategic silence becomes deliberate, not absence, but control. In the palace, restraint itself communicates authority. Every moment measured, every pause intentional. Because in systems like this, what is unspoken carries as much consequence as what is declared. The crown does not simply demand obedience. It demands perception, and perception, once compromised, is difficult to reclaim. The palace is quiet, yet tension accumulates like a shadow at dusk. Every ceremony, every public engagement, reinforces more than tradition, it signals stability to a nation and to the world. For Princess Leonor, this is the reality of growing into her role. Happiness, personal desire, even curiosity, are filtered through the lens of continuity. What feels private is rarely private, what seems small is never insignificant. Every glance, every decision, every pause is interpreted as evidence of composure, or of deviation. By 8 minutes, an unspoken question emerges: how does one reconcile personal inclination with inherited duty? The answer is not in statements or explanations, but in measured action. The institution can absorb adaptation only when it is predictable, framed by precedent, and softened by ritual. Sudden clarity, or unguarded expression, risks destabilizing perception. Abroad, these nuances matter as much as they do at home. In Washington, analysts track continuity as a metric of institutional credibility, linking the monarchy's composure to Spain's diplomatic stability. London reads the moment with introspection, aware of how generational transitions have historically tested authority. Canada and Australia note symbolism, watching whether traditional structures can adapt without friction. Germany monitors procedure, seeking evidence that formal mechanisms still maintain primacy over personal impulse. By 10 minutes, internal calculation intensifies. Advisors no longer debate whether personal happiness is permissible, they map the ways it can intersect with duty without threatening the visible thread of continuity. Every possible outcome is weighed for structural impact, not individual consequence. Precedent is the silent arbiter. What happens once will guide interpretation for decades. The crown, in this delicate equilibrium, is both inert and active. It exerts authority not through action, but through expectation. A young heir's desires are constrained not to diminish humanity, but to preserve inevitability. Survival of the institution depends not on emotion, but on the careful orchestration of perception. By 12 minutes, the tension becomes kinetic yet invisible. Every choice, every gesture, carries latent consequence. The palace waits, the nation observes, and the world infers. The story is alive, not because events are unfolding, but because potential is being contained, measured, and understood before it is ever visible. This is how continuity holds. Through restraint, through timing, and through the quiet mastery of appearances. The weight of expectation is palpable, though unseen. Each measured step of Princess Leonor carries more than presence, it carries precedent. Every smile, every word, every gesture is a thread in a fabric older than any single generation. By 14 minutes, the tension sharpens into the point of no return. Choices once imagined in private now risk interpretation in public. The institution survives when personal inclination aligns with visible continuity, it falters when alignment is questioned. The crown cannot simply tolerate unpredictability. Its endurance depends on perceived inevitability. Across the globe, reactions crystallize. In Washington, observers parse composure as a measure of Spain's stability. In London, the legacy of generational monarchy frames every nuance, every slight deviation, as a signal. Canada and Australia evaluate how tradition absorbs change without fracture. Germany, methodical, watches whether procedure continues to govern action rather than impulse. Every glance, every pause, every hesitation is part of a subtle dialogue between perception and reality. Within the palace, advisors shift from discussion to contingency. Not to suppress feeling, but to channel it safely into institutional form. Every possible outcome is accounted for, not for its human consequence, but for its effect on continuity. Precedent is the silent arbiter. Once a personal choice is publicly acknowledged, the rules change. What appears spontaneous becomes codified, setting expectations for all heirs to follow. The deeper mystery remains deliberately unspoken. Not because it cannot be articulated, but because articulation would diminish control. Ambiguity allows the monarchy to operate with both restraint and flexibility, signaling composure even amid uncertainty. Silence becomes strategy. Timing becomes power. This is the living thread of continuity, stretched taut between personal desire and public expectation. Every move is deliberate, every pause intentional. The crown watches itself being tested, yet its endurance does not depend on emotion, it depends on the mastery of perception and the careful orchestration of appearance. History sharpens its tools quietly, long before events make themselves visible. And in that quiet, the crown prepares, measured and alert, for what may come next. The palace holds its breath, though no one speaks. Every corridor, every chamber, carries the weight of history, expectation, and the quiet persistence of the crown itself. For Princess Leonor, this is the moment where personal desire and inherited duty coexist in uneasy balance. Happiness is possible, but it must pass through the filter of continuity. Every choice, every gesture, every pause will be interpreted, remembered, and referenced as part of a legacy that stretches centuries. The words return, not as question, not as judgment, but as measure, of restraint, of perception, of the silent equilibrium that sustains monarchy. Across capitals, observers acknowledge it. Washington notes composure, London sees careful negotiation, Ottawa and Canberra measure symbolism, Berlin evaluates procedure. The crown's endurance is not in defiance, but in mastery over interpretation. Continuity is preserved not by declarations, but by coherence. Structure outlasts impulse. Timing outlasts spontaneity. The institution remains, poised at the edge of history, aware that what follows will not be dictated by chance, but by the careful orchestration of expectation, precedent, and perception. And yet, the story is unfinished. The future leans forward, unclaimed, quietly waiting. Every observer waits. Every precedent waits. Every possibility waits. The crown endures, vigilant, measured, and ready, but the next chapter has not yet been written.